Hi, this is Brian Birdwell, and welcome to Session 9. Let's begin with our last hardcore verbal drill of the course. I'll give you a minute for this one. Okay, here a warm up. We have Francis gearing up to ask for a raise, meaning he was preparing to ask, but a pivot. He was afraid to do something to the topic after cost cutting measures were announced. Well, he wanted a raise, then he heard they were cutting costs, so he got afraid to do what? Well, most of you probably said something along the lines of bring up the topic after cost cutting measures were announced. And it's always fun when your fill in actually is a choice. The other correct answer here is broach. All right, a minute for this one. All right, in this one we have a couple of pivots, it seems. We have some legal codes. Murder of a child is punished more harshly than that of an adult. In others, the ending of an established life. So we have some legal codes versus other legal codes, and we have established life more harshly than the snuffing out of a. I'm curious what many of you put in the blank here. You know by now that I'm a big fan of recycling words that are already in the sentence. So here, I simply said non established one. Established versus non established. When we get to the answer choice, things can be a little difficult here, as always with vocabulary. A couple of great words here meaning in a beginning stage or an early stage, both incipient and nascent. If you didn't know the word incipient before now, it's a great one to look up because to me, incipient always meant something bad. Incipient anger, and I always thought it was just sort of a negative word, but it really means just beginning to happen. Anger that is beginning to rise. All right, moving on. Harold's grandfather is unamused, and he's going to withhold Harold's inheritance unless he grows up, gets a job, and ceases his. What would you say here in the blank? I just said the opposite of grown up. So he's going to withhold his inheritance unless he grows up and ceases his non grown up pranks, his childish pranks. And the best matches here, of course, for childish are puerile and sophomoric. You may have noticed that there's a false triple in this choice. Juvenescent is a really appealing word to many on this problem. However, juvenescent just means sort of a return to youth or a youthful resurgence of some kind, like a spring. It doesn't have the negative connotation that we need here. So if you at least isolated those three as being the three viable answers, then you're really utilizing the process to its fullest. All right, our first logical argument of the day. Remember, good process here. Identify the question type, analyze the stimulus, process of elimination. I'll give you about a minute and a half. Remember, on questions that ask you which of the following follows logically, there is no conclusion in the argument essentially, because your job is to draw that conclusion. So really what you need to do is simply isolate the facts. And here we have a couple of relevant facts. Women take more sick days, and women come to work more often when they are sick. So take a moment to digest that. They take more sick days, and they're also more likely to come into the office and work when they are sick. What does this mean? Well, it means answer choice D. They must be getting sick more than the men because they tend to work when they're sick and they're taking more sick days. In other words, the women are taking their sick days only when they're really, really sick. So if they're both taking more days and coming in on their sick days, or excuse me, when they are sick, they must be sicker, so to speak, than the men. Just looking at the other answer choices here, with answer choice A, many illnesses more common. Of course, this is a generalization that's far beyond the scope of these two facts. With answer choice B, it's probably true, but the argument doesn't tell us that this is why they are missing. With answer choice C, we cannot be sure of this. This is speculation. And E, of course, is wildly out of scope. Remember that answer choice D is the only one that really deals with the two single facts that we have presented. So just based on relevance alone, it's the best choice. All right, it's time for a reading comp passage now. This one is in 9.3 of your handbook, and it's simply called Short Passage. It begins with the sentence, "Is the rightness of an action?" Go ahead and pause the recording if you need to locate that. Once you've found it, I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock. If you want to challenge yourself to be under time pressure, or you're just feeling confident, then cut yourself off at 90 seconds for the sketch. Here we go. While there are some challenging philosophical vocabulary words in this passage, the overall structure is actually quite simple. In the first paragraph, we defined deontological ethics and we give two examples, Kant and Ross. In the second paragraph, we have criticisms of deontological ethics from Bentham and from Aretaeic theories. And then finally, Aristotle is mentioned in the very bottom of the second paragraph. Let's take a look at our questions. 1 minute for this one. Let's take a look at process of elimination for this problem. Answer choice A sounds pretty appealing. It begins with a question. We'll leave it. Answer choice B, no process is outlined here, and the contrast or the criticism doesn't even begin until the second paragraph. Answer choice C introduces a theory and indicates variations in that theory. That sounds pretty good too. Better leave that one. With answer choice D, it does not advance an argument that is later disputed. And this is a pretty fine distinction here, but it's discussing theories In criticism of that theory, this is very different from advancing an argument that will be disputed later. With answer choice E, no reconciliation is attempted in the first paragraph. So really A and C are the top two choices here. A seems like the obvious one because it does begin with a question. However, A is a trap answer. This question is never answered. The real function of the first paragraph is simply to introduce the idea of deontological ethics and to demonstrate or show two variations, Kant's interpretation and Ross's interpretation. And that's it. That's what the first paragraph does. What do we know about teleological theories of ethics? Well, that word comes up first, and maybe the only time, in the very beginning of the first paragraph, where we know that deontological ethics, or deontological ethics, are in contrast to teleological or utilitarian ethics. So I might just kind of draw a chart or a line on a page and say that D is on one side and T and U are on the other. What else do we know? Well, in the second paragraph, we find out that Bentham is a utilitarian philosopher and a critic of deontological ethics. So this is sort of the last thing that we know. We know that T, or teleological, and U, utilitarian, are on the same side as is Bentham. And on the other side is deontological. So with this information, let's go to the choices. With answer choice A, unlike utilitarian theories, they are in opposition to the main idea of deontological. The second half is absolutely correct, but this is not unlike utilitarian theories. This is just like utilitarian theories. With answer choice B, like utilitarian theories, they are in opposition to the main idea of deontological ethics. This is our answer. Notice how answer choice A and B are direct opposites of one another. This is often a clue that one of them is correct. So if you have nothing else to do, guess between one of those two on a question like this. With answer choice C, they are unlike deontological theories, but we don't know whether or not they are in opposition to the main idea of virtue ethics. With answer choice D, they are not like deontological theories. In fact, they stand in opposition to deontological theories. With answer choice E, we have no idea. This is widely out of scope. Philosophy programs are never mentioned. All right, another arguments question. And it looks like a long one. I'll give you a little extra time. So which of the following would it be most important to establish in order to support a conclusion that the reduction in hospital beds is responsible for the increase in mortality? Notice the causation here. The reduction in hospital beds is causing the increase in mortality. So this is the conclusion that we want to support, that the hospital beds reduction is responsible for the increase in mortality. Well, let's look at our argument. What do we know? What we know is that beds have gone down in the United States and deaths have gone up, while in Japan, beds have gone up and deaths have gone down. And we want to conclude that the reduction in beds is what has caused the increase in mortality. So once you notice that it's a causal argument, your job is a lot easier. What would you want to establish? You'd want to establish that something else didn't cause the mortality in the United States. And that is answer choice E. It turns out this question is a lot simpler than it may at first appear, because ultimately, in order to draw a conclusion about the number of beds causing deaths in the United States, Japan is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter what's happening in Japan. What matters is what's happening in the United States, and that's what we're trying to draw a conclusion about. So the whole idea of this comparison to Japan is meant to distract and confuse us. With answer choice A, it doesn't really matter what's going on in other countries. With answer choice B, it doesn't matter what happened before this. We're trying to conclude that this decrease in beds caused the mortality. So what was happening before we decreased the beds doesn't matter. With answer choice C, it doesn't matter what happened in Japan. This comparison is absolutely irrelevant. It doesn't say that deaths increased more than they did in Japan or something like this. There's no relative comparison going on. The conclusion is simply this lack of beds caused deaths in the United States. So once you realize that the whole Japan idea is a red herring, it's a lot easier to eliminate appealing choices like C or D. Remember, focus on the conclusion. And here the conclusion is given in the question stem, so that's kind of an added layer of difficulty. But if the conclusion is about causality, you need to ask questions like, what else could be causing this? That would be the number one question. That's answer choice E. One minute for this one. This problem is a little more challenging if you don't know the meaning of the idiom decked out. But in context, maybe you could piece it together that we're talking about contestants of a child pageant. They were decked out, and you could just say decked out again, of course. You could recycle that and look for a similar phrase in the answer choices. Or you could say something a little more descriptive, such as dressed up or something along those lines. By pushy stage parents whose antics were deemed, well, you already know that they're pushy, so you could say pushy here and recycle that word, or you could keep reading. By critics who consider such peasants a gauche waste of money and misappropriation. So you could also recycle the descriptive word gauche here to plug in the blank. Or you could use a word that you have more mastery over. If you can see here that with stage parents in quotes, they're pushy, they had antics. Clearly, this is all a negative view, a negative spin. So, any adjectives that suggest that the critics are viewing these parents with a negative view would be appropriate. And when you get to the answer choices, of course, bedizened and crass are our best choices here. All right, 1 minute for this one.